welcome to the Asian American Forward podcast. It's just our usual crew today, and we're discussing an issue that's really controversial. It's been in the news a little bit lately with some recent Justice Department announcements. So we're talking about affirmative action, and of course, joining me today is my regular co-host, Don. How are you, Don?
Hey, Katie. Hi, everyone. Nice to meet with you either on the YouTube or on the podcast.
It's good to be back as usual. And we've had a few guests lately, so it's nice to have just the two of us for a little while. But before we get into all of the issues surrounding affirmative action and talk a little bit about cases that have been going through the courts in recent years, I wanted to give the audience a little bit of context. So I did some research and we'll give up some background based on my reading, but also you can jump in at any point if you feel like I'm missing something. So you can just let me know. So I kind of am borrowing a lot of this from an article that I read from the New Yorker. The reporter's name was Louis Menand. I could be pronouncing that wrong, but I wanted to read this paragraph out from the beginning of his article because I think it really encapsulates a lot of the tensions that are at the center of affirmative action as a policy. So I will read from his article before I get into it. But he wrote that the terrible paradox of the civil rights movement is that outlawing racial discrimination made it harder to remediate its effects. Once we amend the Constitution and pass laws to protect people of color from being treated differently in ways that were harmful to them, the government had trouble enacting programs that treat people of color differently in ways that might be beneficial. We took race out of the equation only to realize that if we truly wanted not just equality of opportunity for all Americans, but equality of result, we needed to put it back in. And our name for that paradox is affirmative action, is what Menand writes. So the issue that he's kind of brings up here is that, so once we said in the Constitution that you can't discriminate on someone based off of race, that means that you can't harm someone or deny them a service because of race, but it also means that you can't provide a benefit because of race in many cases. And sort of the way that affirmative action has been used is to try and get around that issue. So it was originally, the term was coined by the Kennedy administration when they were setting up this committee on equal employment opportunity. But it's the concept of allowing or setting aside specific positions or taking into consideration. It most often comes up in the context of hiring and also college admissions, which we're going to talk about. It's always been controversial, especially when it's referred to as quotas, which are officially illegal as of 1978. So that's requiring that a certain number of a position be held by someone with a specific minority identity. So it seems though affirmative action has been effective at improving diversity, and it's pretty hard to prove that a minority hire almost always took the place at the expense of a better qualified white person. So it's hard to parse out oftentimes, and we'll see this later when we get into admissions data, how a company or a college is making a decision and whether or not you can actually point to affirmative action and say that choice was made because of race or because of gender or some other reason. So I will, before I let you jump in, give a quick background. So the big affirmative action case is the University of California versus Bakke. Am I saying it right?
Yeah, Bakke. Just Bakke. Yeah.
Okay, Bakke. Yeah. So that was a 1978 case. And so this was a white student who sued the University of California, Davis, because he had twice been rejected from their law school.
Medical
and
school.
What? Or medical school, yeah, medical school. And so what they found was that they ran kind of two separate admissions pools, one for minority applicants. They set aside 16 spots for that, and then a separate regular admissions for the remaining, I forget how many spots. I think it was 100 total spots. So
170.
70.
168, something around there.
Yeah, somewhere in there, 100 or 200 spots. Anyway, so the court concluded in that case that Davis could reasonably decide that a diverse class provides a better learning environment, considerations of an applicant's race as one factor among others can fall within the exercise of a constitutionally protected right, but also at the same time, you can't have a quota, so you can't set aside certain numbers. And so this issue kind of has continued to be litigated in the court. And most recently, and probably the most high profile of these cases, is the Students for Fair Admissions versus Harvard, right? So this was a group of white and Asian American students who kind of banded together to sue Harvard, alleging that Asian American students and white students were discriminated against by the admissions of Harvard and held to like higher standards than other minority applicants. They ultimately lost. Ultimately, Harvard won the case, but there has been some similar. During the Trump administration, there was a really similar case against Yale. So, Dawn, I wanted to bring your voice in here to kind of get your perspective as an American immigrant about how you've like related to these policies and the idea of affirmative action.
Yeah, since I study law in this country, so it's affirmative action. If we purely from the legal perspective, affirmative action is not very good, solid legal argument. It's just a kind of a redress what's the past wrong and try to do some correction to make the bad things becoming better. But when they do something, the do something becoming unfair to some other people. That's the controversial at this moment. So originally, all Black people has been discriminated both in the college admission and also it's in the job market. So it's the civil rights or progressive movement from the 60s and from Supreme Court and all the way push the affirmative action until today. But the trouble for the new immigrant like myself or it's our generation, new immigrant, most people coming from mainland China, they have been educated in elite college there already. So people coming here, they attend the graduate school, got a master, PhD, and they expected their next generation, their kids, can go through the same path by study hard and get a higher SAT score and admitted into the Ivy League college. So their life in the future assumed to be better. So it's affirmative action. It's kind of for them, it's a kind of a reverse discrimination because they think they are elite, they are smart. But if you lower the standard of admission in the college, not fully review the students by the academic score, but put some other factor there, it's become the very competitive for them. They think their life is only one threshold. They can change their life. They can either get into the elite college, they become better people, become richer people, or become elite social class. That's their mentality. That's why they are so strongly against the affirmative action. And originally, I published myself just purely from ideologically think it's affirmative action is wrong. But when I gradually extend my network, my friendship to the community, to the Black community, to the Latino community, to the politician circle, and when we make a public policy or making choice, sometimes we have to consider the minority or it's the socially disadvantaged group. In that case, I think it's the affirmative action. It still have some social implication and still play very important role. And the discrimination, sometimes it's on the surface, sometimes it's below the water. It's people say, oh, I don't like Asian, I don't like a Latino, I don't like a Black. At this moment, the American, no one going to openly make this kind of a claim.
Right.
But when you have a political power, when you have a decision making, especially when there's an all white male make a decision, they tend to admit the white or they admit their own ethnic group. So it's the implied discrimination still there, especially in the job market. So it's the but business people, especially bigger corporation, they see the advantage or the merit of the new immigrant, no matter where they're coming from. They tend to admit more Asian engineers from India, from China, or from Russia. They're very, very talented. So it's, they want to apply the affirmative action in the job market. College admission is totally different. College admission, both in the California and in the Harvard or those Ivy League, just as you said, in 1978, all the admission has been labeled quota as illegal. So no school can use the quota to admit the students. But the Supreme Court has been back and forth on this particular issue. It's very, very ambiguous. They set up a standard. No one can make a clear decision whether it's discriminate or not discriminate, but they put a risk as one of a factor to generate a more diversified college environment study, and also create the future community service and all the ethnic group they can in this society have a service field, especially like doctors. They want more doctors to help minority people with their color. For example, if I'm a Chinese American, I tend to visit a Chinese doctor. Even I can speak Chinese to the doctor, so I can describe what's the symptom and what's the disease and how I feel. But if I talk to Caucasian doctor, I don't know the terminology at all. So those kind of a social impact is very, very complicated. If you purely from a theory, affirmative action is at this moment is kind of outdated already, because we think it's the Black people, they have after like a half century, the movement, it's the Black people has been grab a lot of political power. For the California, Latino has been grab a lot of political power. So, but when they have a top has a political power, but at the bottom they have 80% of people is a disadvantage or minority. So they try to use their political power and use the affirmative action as a tool to solve the majority of their voter basis of people, and try to give them a more opportunity to get into the society. That's kind of a controversial between equal opportunity and the equality of the result. So it's most progressive, especially in California, they looking for result, because if that result is good and gradually it's 10 years, 20 years, and the people get a good education, the minority, they're going to improve their lifestyle. For Asian, especially for the first generation Chinese here, oh my God, it's a disaster for them, because this is the reverse discriminate and totally killed their past and block their past to move up on the social ladders. That's my understanding.
Yeah, I'm really curious. It also, I mean, because we've brought up a couple times the tension between equality of outcome. Yeah, equality of opportunity versus equality of outcome or equality of result. And like, I think in American culture, there's still like not really resolution on that issue about whether we should be aiming for equal results or just that everyone should be at the same starting line, I think is like a metaphor that's brought up often. So do you have like a perspective on like whether the ultimate goal is equality of result or equality of opportunity?
Of course, my personal perspective is equality of opportunity is idealism. That's the best for any society. But at this moment, there have some the transition period. This transition period may be 50 years or maybe 100 years. But I see the light at the tunnel. So it's the finally equality of opportunity going to take over the entire society. Just like you see all the Ivy League college or the school, they start to abolish the SAT exam.
Yeah.
That's the very, very important signal. It's this thing is for responsibility of a university. We are not only looking for people who can handle tests the best, and also it's the rich people, they tend to give their kids a lot of good outside school, in the middle school,
right? Because they can invest in tutors,
yeah,
and like
tutoring.
test prep books and all of that stuff. Yeah.
Yes, that's they have. But the poor guys and the family with less economic advantage, they cannot afford it. They can only enjoy whatever the public school provided. But they have some other talent. Those talent for the future people, and the life is becoming a whole life of study, not decided by one admission. You go to the Ivy League and then you win. You are the winner. So it's this gradually change this mentality. But for Asian, especially for Chinese, they need a time to adopt this one. That's why it's so many people start to looking for around their community, try to do some charity work, and try to get into the political the involvement. That's kind of a good trend for the Asian community, for Chinese community to adopt this one. The case of the fire admission suit Harvard, that case is very typical. The lawyer is called Edward Blom. He's has used his whole life to sue the elite the college for admission, because he firmly believes this is a reverse admission. If a Supreme Court changed the court composition from a liberal to the conservative, especially now, it's a very, very good opportunity to shift the decision, because the Supreme Court is always put a very ambiguous standard of admission there. But this time, if they have another case, bring to the Supreme Court, probably the conservative going to vote maybe 5-4 or 6-1, or whatever is a majority is a conservative. Yeah. So they're probably going to apply the equality opportunity much stronger tendency to over the equality of result. And also the affirmative action is gradually they lose their the argument, because the society has been tend to gradually go to the more equality. That's the basically is my feeling and the prediction.
Yeah, I certainly hope that like going to an Ivy League school is not the only way to guarantee a good life, because I went to a small private school.
Yeah.
So yeah, I definitely think that also there's like a lot of like cultural perceptions about, you know, status maybe is the right way to talk about it. But like, I think this is not only true among Asian Americans, but definitely like all Americans. Like if you go to Harvard or Yale or Princeton, like everyone knows those names. And that we still do attach a certain amount of like, I don't know, privilege, or we attach a certain amount of like value to people who are able to achieve those things. So I'm curious also like how maybe since coming to the US, your mindset has like shifted about like affirmative action, or like what changed your mind to sort of like broaden your perspective about like the essential, like how important it is to get into the elite universities, and then also like about who even deserves to be at these elite schools.
My thinking or experience is similar like all the people. If you come into this country longer enough, your mentality, your philosophy, your observation to the society will change gradually. It's at the very beginning, I totally have a Republican mindset. free market, and as long as you work hard, as long as you study hard, you become in the elite. You have you enjoy your life. I went to University of Pennsylvania. It's called elite, right?
Yeah, good school.
Yeah, it's I feel I'm good. But later, when you go working with people from private small college, you think they are very smart too. So it's really doesn't matter after 10, 20 years, you graduate, no matter which school you are graduate. And for the employer, they more pay attention, not to your which college you graduate, but what kind of person you are and how you can finish your job and how you treat other people. That's the fundamental factor to affect your life, affect your leadership. And most people, new immigrant, they still at the stage, they very narrow-minded, just based on their life experience, thinking the only way to achieve your life goal is go to the elite of university. I think it's at least at the moment, me, it's totally changed already because I have a so extensive the network with all different ethnic group, and when I have a social justice or it's a social welfare is the issue coming up, you have to negotiate with all kind of people, and then you understand what's their situation. By this way, you can put your feet into other people's shoes to think. That's totally change your mentality. But if you insulate yourself only in your own community, you only associate with your alumni, associated with your peer, you will never see this country. So you only judge whether it's a justice or it's a fairness, it's from your personal experience. But if you think from other people's, the mind is you're going to change your mind.
Yeah, that's such a good perspective too, that like justice is really, well, fairness maybe is really determined by your perspective and like where you're looking at the problem from. So like, of course, if you're someone who like has a perfect ACT score or SAT score and you got rejected from Harvard, you're
Yeah.
gonna feel really differently than if you're someone who like has grown up in a poor environment and had to work really, really hard and didn't have all the extra tutors or whatever it was that it would take someone to reach that kind of point academically. And so there are all these questions about also like merit and meritocracy. I haven't gotten the chance to read, but I have listened to a lot of interviews with really famous political philosopher from Harvard, who we've talked about before, not on the show, but just in our own conversations, Michael Sandel, who just released a book where he talks a lot about college admissions, called The Tyranny of Merit, and kind of about how like our idea that going to these top colleges and earning your spot into like an elite life, not only is it like sort of untrue, that like the extent to which any of us can really earn anything that we have is maybe like a little more complicated than we give it credit for, but also that it's like harmful not only to like the people who are like trying to strive for these like high positions, but also that sort of like driven a lot of the like resentment based politics on the right of the last decade or so. So I wonder if you had any thoughts about like just even the idea of meritocracy in general, that is it even possible for us to like earn something and it be perfectly fair like that?
Yeah, it's the same thing. It's we all have been pretty impacted by the Michael Sanders the theory about the social justice and also about meritocracy. So that's kind of things that you cannot reject the people's experience, and then it's that have effects to prove. If you go those elite 80% percentage, you are going to be enjoy a very good life in the after graduation. The challenge I think is for me is that people confuse that elite the admission kind of not very closely related to affirmative action. Affirmative action actually play not very important role in the elite, the Ivy League admission. Most 80% or even 90% the factor or cause the racial disparity is not race factor played there or affirmative action there. It's just based on their traditional, the alumni case, or either they have a special talent, or it's based on your donation give to Harvard or Yale or Princeton. So you can see the generation, the parent went to Harvard and their kids went to Harvard and their kids went to the Harvard. That's kind of things they can contribute and build their personal relation to each elite school. Mm-hmm. Affirmative action, in generally, they only cost like 5% to 10%. But also you see the percentage, Asian or Chinese admission rate in the Harvard or in any Ivy League is more than 15 to 25%. That's the range. But in terms of,
so I want to make sure that we're clear on stats. So you're talking about the admission rate, like the percentage of Asian Americans who are accepted, or are you talking about the percentage of Asian Americans relative to the whole student body?
Okay, there's two numbers. One is the percentage of admission.
Okay.
Asian take like 20% already. And in terms of population, it's in this country, Asian is only less than 5%.
Right. So Asian Americans 2%. Are tend to be overrepresented in universities relative to the population of the whole country.
Yes. But the problem is the Asian tend to try to apply for the elite program, the university. So you can see the compare with the admission and compare with the base is how many applicants from Asian and how many Asian admitted. So it's like 5,000 the Asian apply for 10 spots. So that's cost their internal competition. Mm-hmm. So it's about the lawsuit turn this one, put a label on the affirmative action, but in didn't use the population wide. But if you use the Harvard standard, they said we don't discriminate you. The number tell we over admitted you more than the demographic percentage already. Why you sue us? But the fair student admission say our score is way high than any other ethnic group. But if they based on the SAT, the entire Harvard or Yale or Princeton, every school is going to have 80% Asian or Chinese already. That's going to happen. So it's if you think that's fair, or it's if you're based on the lawsuit, their argument, that's going to be happen. So it's I don't think American people going to accept those kind of admission rates.
Yeah, I was I was trying to find stats about acceptance rates for Asian Americans, which is actually surprisingly hard to do. But I also found a similar statistic to you, right? That the student body of most universities, or I'm not sure if this was Ivy League universities or the one that I found was a little bit old. It was from 2005. But about 20% of a college is Asian American, and compared to the whole population of the United States, that's way overrepresented. If you compare also, I was looking at the average combined SAT score. These numbers are as of 2015, so they're a little bit old, but the average Asian American score is 1654. Compare that to so Black American average score is 1277. White American is 1576. Mexican American is 1343. So, right, the point that you just made, which is that if you let people in solely on the basis of their test scores, you would end up with schools that are mostly Asian, which doesn't really line up with the population of the US at all, which I think is a really interesting way also into questions about what is the role of these elite universities in the nation? Are they meant to be representative of our population, or what should they be aiming for when they're admitting students? Do you have a perspective on that?
Yeah, I personally think this is the entire education philosophy and the impact to the future of mankind and what kind of people the education institute going to play. So it's the gradually, I think it's all the university president or principal, they can start to thinking what kind of a human capital they try to build for the future society. And they probably want to build a more human-centered people and the talent. And the future leaders and with the heart of a humanity is more important than the test score. And also the test score is like a SAT. That's the Second World War II used the standard to try to put some the veterans back to school and those kind of outdated standard. And it's not fit to the current situation. And now it's the people take advantage of SAT. They said, okay, let's focus my 5 years or 2 years, just focus academic and try to multiple choice and make sure that everyone I guess right. And then I changed my life. So it's I think within 5 years, all this going to be gone. Most parent or new immigrant, right? Or this episode, I just want to make sure that they understand this trend, their education purpose for their kids, and make sure that they can change their mentality and the philosophy of education.
Yeah, so I think, yeah, definitely. I'm totally with you there on educating people who are like have a heart for humanity is way more important than like those test scores or whatever number. And I also think it's really interesting to think about how admissions are going to go in the next several years. Obviously, I think the pandemic has probably accelerated that a little bit. Many schools, including the University of California system this year,
Yeah.
waived the SAT requirement. So it'll be really interesting to see like how this year even has an impact on the future of college admissions and whether that like accelerates the end of standardized testing or if standardized testing is just going to become replaced by some other factor. But I think that is kind of a good note to end on. I will give you an opportunity to say if there's any last notes that we didn't cover from today that you want to just share about affirmative action or college admissions or even the purpose of education in general.
Yeah, I think it's the one word to summarize what I'm thinking is affirmative action is not perfect, but this is the one realistic has been left many disadvantaged people in the past. But for the new generation, affirmative action may be going to go to the probably go to the end of their life, or this concept is going to be disappeared in maybe 10, 20 years. But for the education, I think it's more and more people, or it's a parent or first generation immigrant like me, from in the past like 3 years, more and more the high school kids coming to me say, Don, I don't want to focus my last senior year, junior years, focus on SAT. I want to get more involvement in the community service, more get into the political process, help others to do the campaign and involve in the political, the process. That's kind of a sign that many people or parents, they realize the education for their kids, if they get early involvement in the community, in the politics process, and especially so I'm doing the first lines of political stuff. So it's I can just bring them to all the volunteer work. They feel, their kids feel it's a very enrichment and fulfill for their life. That's the trend. And I think this trend is going to be stronger and stronger. More and more young people, they're going to form their own judgment to the society by involving the out school activities instead of focus only on the math or only on the scores.
Mm-hmm.
Of course, if you want to be scientist, you want to be get all straight A in the math, in the physics, in the chemical. That's fine. But it's for the people. If you want to get a well-educated college life, the other, especially literature or politics or sociology, play much more important role.
Yeah, I like to hear that about literature as an English major who gets a lot of shade thrown at me for being an English major. Because the question is always, what are you going to do with that?
Yeah, that's the trouble for most Asian parents is the philosophy and anthropology and sociology, literature. Those kind of a major is the most Asian they try to avoid. They only want to their kids like a doctor, engineer, or lawyers. That's it. But when you grow up, especially past the age maybe 25, 30, or even older, you will see the literature going to impact your entire life and the happiness and also the purpose of your life is going to form because the literature generally is just give much more broader meaning of life.
That is a good, wonderful place to end. I will say one last thing too that I wanted to throw in because we didn't talk very much about like K through 12 education, but I think that's like just as important to this conversation. I was educated in American public schools, and I think that was like a really important formative experience for me. And so I'm like a huge advocate for public schooling. So I wanted to read a quote from Thomas Jefferson, who's kind of like the OG of encouraging free public education for all Americans. So I want to read this before I close, which he said, "Educate and inform the whole mass of the people. They are the only sure reliance for the preservation of our liberty." So just like as we close, I want to emphasize also that even though we spend like so much time talking and thinking about Ivy Leagues, education is really something that's for everyone, whether you're like a young kindergartner or you're like in your 60s and you want to like take a course at community college to learn more about something. So I wanted to wrap it up there for this week. And Don, it was so interesting to hear your perspective on this.
Thank you. I do enjoy this subject. I think this is continually will be the battleground and the battlefield for people to think and where is the justice, what's the social justice means, and for the majority people, this society never be 100% absolutely justice. So you have to working with all the ethnic group, try to understand each other and gradually reach the equality of opportunity.
Well done. Thank you. And as usual, my name is Katie Simpson. Our podcast is sponsored by Asian American Forward. You can visit our website at www.asianamericanforward.com. If you enjoyed the show this week or have a topic you'd like to hear us discuss on a future episode, send us your comments at info@asianamericanforward.com. You can also find our Facebook and hear more conversations between Don and I at our YouTube channel, which you should also subscribe to. If you're a fan of the show, please leave us a review in the Apple Podcast Store or tell someone about us. It really helps people find the show. Thanks for listening. We'll talk to you next week.
Thank you. Thank you. Bye, Katie. See you.